Hey cats, I'm Rembrandt and welcome back to my channel. You may have noticed I changed my name, but don't fret over names. You can call me anything you want, just don't call me late for dinner. I got a Gamecube a couple years after it released, and one of my all-time favorite games to play on it was Animal Crossing. Catching bugs, fishing, and pulling weeds was such a therapeutic process for 9-year-old me. My mom also loved playing, and she would spend hours perfecting her town, and we would often travel to one another's towns and leave messages and gifts. Playing Animal Crossing with my mom will always be one of my fondest memories with her. I will be building the fully upgraded version of the player house using this photo for reference. Using this amiibo for size scale reference, I began cutting up some foam board. I first cut out the door, which was 3.5 by 6.5 centimeters, and then the main walls. The front and back walls are 12 by 13 centimeters, and the side walls 8 by 13 centimeters. Using some more foam, I constructed the foyer, or is it foyer? Continuing with the usage of foam, I cut out some rectangles, which I then turned into triangles that would become the gables for the roof. Remember, a clean workstation is a happy workstation. Cutting up some paperboard, I was able to make these roof shingles. If you don't have any paperboard, just steal some from the cereal box in the kitchen. After 3 hours of making paper shingles, I began gluing them in place with some tacky glue. But I quickly realized that the white foam board would be very noticeable through any gaps, so I quickly painted the foam roof black, and I continued gluing the shingles in place. There was a gap at the peak of my roof due to some poor construction, so I filled the gap with this wooden dowel and painted it black. Using a couple triangles, I was able to make the dormer on the front roof part of the house. After gluing the dormer in place, I finished the front part of the main roof and took this terrible progress picture to showcase my work thus far. Instead of a foam door, I decided I wanted it to be made from wood, so I cut out this piece from the foyer. Just a little more roof work left in the foyer. I painted the foam black and installed some more paper shingles, and wow, doesn't that look great? I'm finished fiddling with foam for now, and it's time to move on to the next phase of this build. It's time for some wood. Using some balsa wood, I started the tedious trim work. I started the process by cutting long lengths at a 1/4 inch width and began gluing them in place. I considered using the coffee stirring sticks that I already had, but they weren't as thick as I would have liked. This is me ripping off some house bandages that were keeping those seams nice and tight while the glue dried. Yep, that's a house. This is me constructing a window with those coffee stirring sticks I was raving about earlier. It was at this point that the house was really starting to take shape, and I was pleased with my craftsmanship thus far. But don't worry, I'm sure I'll find a way to mess it up later in the build. Just cutting a few window holes. Oh hey there little fella, how are you? Now it might not be obvious by my pristine carpentry work, but I'm actually an electrician. Using a recycled yogurt bowl it's time to mix up some Mod Podge and black paint and cover this house in goop. Delicioso. Spread the goop generously over your work to seal it all in before covering it in a base layer of gray spray paint primer. I let this little chicken dry in my garage for 24 hours before moving on to the next phase of the build. I'm painting the roof with folk art acrylic paint, and this color just happens to be called Look at Me Blue. Painting is the part of the build I don't particularly enjoy, but a necessary one for sure. I just feel like I'm not going to paint it well enough, and it'll just end up looking okay instead of great like I imagine it would in my mind. A few coats later, and wow, that roof really does look good. You can see I've started painting the house white. This is titanium white. In hindsight, I wish I'd used something a little darker. This shade was just too bright. I wish I'd used something a little creamier.
I'd say creamulum.
I had actually intended to start with the wood trim, painting it brown, but I had spilled a large glob of white paint while moving some things around on my desk. I spent a lot of time trying to be neat and not get too much white paint on the wood trim, which didn't really matter in hindsight, but it was good practice nonetheless. A few hours later and several coats, the white paint would be done for now.
Whoa.
Time for some more carpentry as I begin constructing the windows. A test fit for the windows.
Hello there.
Painting this trim was an absolute nightmare. I started off painting carefully, trying to keep the brown off the white, but I quickly abandoned that after realizing that the trim was just like the rest of the house and would need multiple coats to cover the gray primer. Just look at all that touch-up painting I'll be doing. I really wish I had thought to paint the trim before installing it on the house, but oh well. Going back and watching myself do the touch-up painting all around the house, I found it kind of funny, all of the contorting and hand positions and arm positions I was having to do, so I thought I would include that for your viewing pleasure. I had actually picked up some new brushes just for this precision painting along all of the trim pieces, and I was pretty satisfied with how well they did.
Wow. Oh, that's nice.
The house is nearly finished and I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out so far. The windows are the only thing I can complain about, but that's okay. Alright mate, let's make a chimney. After cutting some foam into tiny bricks, give them a little pat to ensure they're happy. These chunky boys are looking pretty good, but we need to fill in those gaps with some modeling paste.
Delicious.
After filling in the gaps with modeling paste, I covered them in Mod Podge just like I did earlier in the video. Now, I used this off-white color at first on the chimneys. It probably would have looked better for the sides of the house, now that I think about it, but I ended up painting the chimneys gray. Now it's on to the final phase of the build, the base. I'm all about that base, or something like that, I don't know. Anyways, I used some housing insulation foam and covered it in modeling paste to give the ground some texture. When you're done, just dab it with a paper towel to get rid of the brush strokes, and you can thank Studson from Studson Studio for that tip. Once the modeling paste dried, I gave it a coat of terracotta paint. I wanted the ground on my base to have the same dirt patch, just like in this reference image I used. I used some yellow ochre paint to create the peanut shape of the dirt patch, and then various shades of yellow to create the ring effect. I didn't like the look of the terracotta paint, so I went over it with some burnt umber. Let's flock. It's time to get that grass. Fake grass, that is. To adhere the flocking to the base, I used some ever faithful Mod Podge. I spread that deliciousness onto the foam and then spread the flocking around with my fingers. Yeah, doesn't that look nice? With the lawn taken care of, it was time to move on to something else that you might have noticed already, the fence. Popsicle sticks and coffee stirrers will do just fine. Using some super glue, I glued the wood together and assembled them into the necessary shape. The end result being this nice little picket fence that I painted white. With the big things taken care of, it was time to move on to the smaller accessories, the mailbox and gyroid. Using some plastic caps and hot glue, I was able to make the main body of the gyroid and then wrapped it in some polymer clay. For the mailbox, I used some paperboard and a plastic straw and constructed them into a mailbox shape. I painted these little cuties off camera as well as the door handle for the door. With everything finished, painted, and constructed, I began gluing everything in place to the base, as well as painting the edge of the foam black. Now it's time for some low-end beauty shots. If you've enjoyed this video in any way, please consider liking and or subscribing to the channel, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching.